Thank you, Claire. And just before, we're very fortunate to have colleagues today from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government with us. But just to build on the points that you've heard from both Councillor Shaw and from Robin, this is collectively about us coming together, whether it's the third sector, whether it's the council. It is about partnership. And actually getting out of today, what will be really important is how we build on the stuff that's happening now. You know, our local area and our local communities and the council working alongside are going to be different. So how we all have a voice in that space is really important. So just wanted to make that point, because I think it's relevant as we go through. And then that leads me to bring onto the stage Sonia and Eleanor. Round of applause, please, for our colleagues. Goodies.
Got to love a bit of a technical issue, haven't you? It wouldn't be right if there wasn't a technical issue. So, first of all, massive thank you for inviting us along. And what an amazing turnout, which just goes to show the commitment really to Luton and moving forward. So, I'm from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. There are two of us here today, but I won't introduce Ellie. We're from the Homelessness Advice and Support Team, otherwise known as the HAS team. And so we have regular meetings with Luton's housing team. We're quite unique as a team, so we're not career civil servants. We are officers, managers, heads of service that have come from a local authority background, and we're hoping that that is our superpower, because we are not coming purely from a policy perspective. We are looking at how policy might be implemented on the ground, and very heavily involved in that, and the reason that I joined the department. So hopefully that's helpful by way of a little bit of context. We've got sort of two-part slides for you today. So we're going to be taking a look at the national context and the policy changes. And then I'm going to be walking you through a little bit of annual data and also a bit of data for Luton. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. We have plenty of time for questions at the end, I am informed. Ellie, can I hand over to you?
Thank you. Right, hold on to it. Good morning, everyone. Please do call me Ellie. I feel like I'm being told off if I'm called Eleanor. So, as Sonia said, we're a bit of a unique team, and we come from the sector. I was at Milton Keynes, so just down the road for 20 years as head of homelessness there, and have been in the HAS team at MHCLG for nearly 4 years now. So I'm going to start the slides and just give a bit of context, a bit of government context, a bit of some information about some recent announcements and looking ahead. So the first slide is setting out the ministerial portfolios for the Deputy Prime Minister and Under Secretary responsibilities, and we're really pleased since the change in government to see such a priority on homelessness and housing. You'll see there that there are a number of activities and areas of responsibility related to that, and for example, the Interministerial Group on Homelessness and Rough Sleeping, the first meeting of that took place last week. So we're really, really pleased to see such importance given to homelessness. In terms of some recent announcements, I'm sure you're all aware that there's been a recent budget announcement. So the autumn budget was announced last week, and that brilliantly provided an increase in funding for 24-25, so an increase of £233 million compared to, 25-26 compared to 24-25, and so that will help to prevent some rises in numbers of families in temporary accommodation and help to prevent rough sleeping. So that brings the total spend to nearly £1 billion for 25-26. And alongside that, you'll see some further announcements, an extra £500 million of funding for the Affordable Homes Programme to deliver additional social housing units, and a new 5-year social housing rent settlement, so to give some the sector more long-term certainty on funding, some changes to the right to buy scheme, and also a very recent announcement in addition to the autumn budget around winter pressures, so £10 million allocated to provide emergency accommodation and safeguard vulnerable people this winter. We're still working through as a government what those allocations look like for local authorities, so we're hoping to be able to confirm that detail very soon. And in addition to this budget announcement, the Chancellor has announced that there will be a spending review in late spring next year, and that will look a minimum of 3 years or a 5-year forecast, so a longer settlement in that announcement there. Robin asked the question earlier around LHA rates and TA subsidy. You'll see that there hasn't been a change in that in this recent budget announcement, but as I say, there is some further work around a further spending review for next year. In terms of looking ahead at policy, I've got a couple of slides here on the Renters' Rights Bill, which has moved quite quickly since the new government, rebadged from the Renters' Reform Bill from the previous government, and it was first introduced to Parliament in September, and there's been quite a bit of progress since then. We're happy to share these slides, and there's lots of useful links on them so that you can have a look at some of the detail following us talking you through it, but I don't intend on reading the points on this slide, but you can see here the key measures that the bill is looking to introduce. And one of the changes since the new government and the renters' rights being amended slightly is around the bill is looking to abolish Section 21s for both new and existing tenants at the same time, so giving renters immediate security and assurance. So that is a change since the new government. In terms of the homelessness impacts, you can see here some of the technical and consequential amendments. So the removing of Section 21 fixed term tenancies and ASTs. And as a result of that, in terms of the legislation, that will mean that the reapplication duty will no longer be relevant. And changes to the legislation would be made to the Code of Guidance once royal assent and the commencement of the provisions. But in terms of some of the major changes and consequences to homelessness is around the some of the definitions of threatened with homelessness and the prevention duty. So we imagine that the removal of, and through some data analysis and work looking at how this would work through, the bill replaces Section 21 with Section 8. So we imagine that there will be more prevention duties owed, and those prevention or the duties will be for a longer period of time. So we're working through at the moment a new burdens assessment so that we can fund councils for additional costs. So we're working through that at the moment. This next slide gives a bit of detail about where the bill is. You'll see there that it's at the committee stage, having had its second reading on the 9th of October, and there is a call for evidence out at the moment. So I've provided the details on this slide about how you can submit written evidence with a deadline of the 28th of November. So this is an opportunity to feed into that part of the process. So in terms of some wider updates and recent announcements, we announced £450 million for the third round of the Local Authority Housing Fund. So 2 elements to this, resettlement units and temporary accommodation units. And it's looking to and expecting to deliver in this third round up to 2,400 homes by 2026. And it also included some revenue funding to help deliver the fund. There was also an announcement around additional funding and extension of funding for the Housing Support Fund, so that's 421 million, and I've included the link there to the relevant information. In terms of the Supported Housing Regulatory Oversight Act, We are planning on consulting around those measures, and we're hoping that that will come out very soon, but we don't have a date, unfortunately, but thought it was important to highlight that that is likely to come through soon, and we'll welcome feedback on that. Popped a link in here as well to the National Audit Office report that was published earlier on this year in the summer, and it has made some recommendations for MHCLG around engagement, looking at the data, strategy, and it's a really useful report actually to reflect on some of the findings, and thought it would be helpful for this event for you to have that information. You mentioned Home Office. There's a couple of points here for information. So MHCLG have been working with the Home Office to consider the information that's provided to asylum seekers, and that includes an infographic that's intended to help individuals with their next stages, what they will need to do next. And it's in addition to the Migrant Help Move On guidance, which is offered to all asylum applicants. So really to try and increase and provide as much information as possible about Move On, including housing, employment, and as early as possible. And the Home Office also resumed sharing the place-based visibility tool earlier on this year, and that's available to local authorities and SMPs to get a better view of the asylum and resettlement population in their areas. So just adding to a bit of the information that Robin gave earlier. And we're working with the Home Office at the moment to have a look at the response in periods of SWEPs, the Severe Weather Emergency Protocol. There was a pause on asylum evictions during those periods for 3 days last year. So we're looking at how that will work for this year and hope to be able to confirm that very shortly. And then just a bit of information on this slide around the join up between MHCLG and Home Office with a Rough Sleeping Lived Experience Forum. And yeah, we're really hopeful that that will help inform learning from these individuals to inform future policy. And I'm going to hand over to Sonia now to have a look at the data. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. I'm not sure if I need my glasses or not. We shall see. So I wanted to walk you through, we do need them, just for your information. So I wanted to take a little bit of a reflection, but I'm going to do death by data here because the data is available publicly. But when we think about the statistical published data for 23-24, thank you very much, technicians. That's amazing. Or maybe I don't need my glasses. They're doing the magic over here. So just really to think about how our world has changed. So just in terms of initial assessments, so 358,370 initial assessments were made in England. That's up 10.4% from the previous year. Of those, 324,990 were assessed as odour duty, so they were either threatened with or already homeless. And so then moving down to the second bullet point, those odour prevention duty, there was an increase of 3.1% from 22-23. And then moving down, sort of what influenced that. Really the end of assured short hold tenancy, be no surprise to anyone about what influenced that rise. There was actually, however, conversely, a 5.2% decrease in households odour duty due to family and friends no longer or willing to accommodate. But I do see local authorities doing a lot of work in that space to speak to families and friends because things are so difficult. So hopefully a bit more family and friend goodwill. 12.3% increase in households odour relief duty. I mean, that's a big number. And equally, so similar to increases in prevention duties, an 8.9% increase in those threatened with homelessness due to end of an AST. So again, that flows through both duties. There's also been a 4.8% increase in households odour relief duty due to friends and family no willing to accommodate. It is the straw that breaks the camel's back often when you get an approach from a single person in relief. But my personal experience with working with Luton, because I am the advisor for Luton, is that Naz's team does an amazing job with stepping in and trying to renegotiate and mediate in that space. So I wanted to just look at April 23 to March 24 for Luton, headlines and reflections. So the graph on the left speaks to the total approaches, the number of duties owed, and also the blue line talks about the cases accepted in prevention. And underneath those, equally, I have sort of played some of those back in terms of the 18.4% increase since the previous quarter, 26.6 since March 23. Similarly, those owed the prevention or relief duty and the increase of 26% there. So these are big numbers. These are reflective of the pressure that the teams are under. On the right-hand side, I've popped in sort of some positive outcomes at prevention and relief duty end. And obviously, whilst the private rented market is really difficult, you work really hard in that space. And so it's just saying that 57.8% of those duties, of those positive outcomes, were into private rent despite the challenges. I just have to caveat all of this. I should pause for a moment and caveat that I can only speak to you about published data. So the last published data set, we've got the annual statistics and we've got January to March 24, and you're probably thinking, wow, we're on the cusp of Christmas. So I am acutely aware that this situation might be different now, but I just wanted to mention that. And I've just done a little bit of reflection in the narrative about comparisons to regional and national averages, and at the bottom there about the social housing outcomes being lower at the prevention duty end than regional and national averages. And a bit about supported housing. When we talk about outcomes and we talk about private rent and social housing being those two predominant ones when you aren't able to negotiate a stay, of course, they generally lean into one side of the business than the other. So if someone's got a really good development profile, they'll lean into the social housing, and if they've got a PRS they can access, they lean into that. But it just kind of demonstrates the interdependencies. So, you know, allocations and homelessness are really closely linked. So we always talk to local authorities about how their allocations policy is serving their homelessness cohorts, particularly prevention. And again, just really picked out a couple of things that I think are important. So evictions from supported housing were higher in this year than Eastern National averages, particularly at relief duty end. However, that sounds like I'm kind of picking a bad point, but we know that there's a problem with those cohorts that have got multiple disadvantage. They're really complex individuals, and so as reflecting that, the single homeless accommodation programme schemes that Luton successfully bid for are coming forward to fill that gap for those more complex individuals, and we do know that our clients are more complex, particularly in that space. Just really wanted to say that referrals by public bodies and other agencies are above the Eastern National averages. So your partners know where to come. So they know where to come, whether they have a statutory duty to refer to you or not, they're coming to you. So that's telling me as an advisor that your partnerships are strong. And as was mentioned earlier, the housing department can't do this on their own, so this is about the whole community, all agencies, all partnerships, public bodies, etc. At the bottom, just reflected back some predominant reasons for homelessness, and so there aren't any surprises in there. 51.2% average approaches due to the end of PRS in that year, with Eastern England averages there. Below average in relation to friends and family evictions, and then also the other predominant reason being loss of tenancy but non-AST. And again, some information mirroring that at the bottom about those relief duty causes. Obviously, domestic abuse is in there as well. We like to think that we could get our domestic abuse referrals through in the prevention space, but that's not always how domestic abuse works. And I don't think it's bad to have a high statistic when we talk about approaches for domestic abuse, because when we think about the Act, it's letting people know who to go to, so they're coming to you, which is a good thing. And there are a multitude of measures, so there isn't just, that's quite just a highlight figure. It doesn't say of all the good work that you're doing to help people to stay in their homes, to move, etc. Thought I'd pop in a couple of graphs so that you didn't just look at words all the time. So wanted to just reflect back and considering comments earlier about the temporary accommodation position in Luton. This is the end of March. This will have changed a little bit since then. So Luton at that point in time had 1,078 households in temporary accommodation, an 8% increase since April 2023. Families in unsuitable bed and breakfast accommodation in the same quarter was 84, and of those 43 exceeded the statutory 6-week limit. And you'll see on the left, I just sort of carved that up so you can see what that looks like. It's a significant pressure for Luton, but what I would say is that we have been and will continue to work with Luton to eliminate the use of unsuitable bed and breakfast, and also to consider other temporary accommodation offers. As I said before, we are the advice and support team. We're not a regulatory organisation, so we are here to help and will continue to do that. And that's us. So I'll bring Ellie back up, and then maybe we can see if there are any questions. I can't guarantee in matters of policy that we'll be able to answer them, though.
Anyone wants a question? So Shaw's in first.
One of the things what could help Luton an awful lot, along the lines of the asylum seekers, what Robin mentioned earlier, is the Home Office gives them a temporary leave to remain, and because they're in private sector accommodation, which have been got by one of your agents, a lot higher rent than the local LHA, they serve with an eviction notice on the same day as well, and they come and present themselves at the council. Wouldn't it be better if the two departments worked together to make sure they only took properties what LHA? One of the reasons we've got a £3 million overspend is we've got to compete with for those private sector properties in the town. What private landlords are thinking, well, why should I go to the council and only get my £1,000 a month when I can go to the Home Office through their agent and get £1,400 a month? And that's putting immense pressure on the private sector in the town. Surely the two departments could work together with a contractor to say, we will only take properties at LHA, and then if they did that, our £3.2 million overspend would go down dramatically because we'd only be paying LHA for the same properties. But I can't understand why you can't do that.
Yeah, we definitely welcome your feedback, and I think we're here, and thank you, we're here in a listening capacity, I think, on that front. Of course, there's lots of work and join up to try and improve processes and lots of the other parts of that particular process. So absolutely, we're the kind of bridge between local government, central government, and we hope to have the voice of local government when we're looking at policies and working with other government departments to kind of look at solutions. So we will absolutely pass that feedback on, but haven't really got any, more information that we can give at this point, other than that, that is being worked on, and we can provide that listening ear at the moment, and then feed that information back to decision makers. Okay.
If I jump in next, so firstly, thank you for coming and spending your time today with us, and generally the support you offer to the team. It really makes a massive difference, so thank you so much for that. A couple of questions for me, probably might be a little bit awkward, some of them, so I sort of apologise now with that preamble, don't I? There is something we are done to by others with regards to other boroughs placing in our area. Is there any opportunity to name and shame, at least, with regards to those who aren't informing and collectively sort of creating pressure elsewhere?
Yeah, as Robin mentioned, there's been a recent letter from the Deputy Prime Minister to all chief executives of local authorities to highlight that exact issue and the reasons for needing to notify, not necessarily stopping placements, but where placements are needed to be made, to at least be notifying, to make sure that the receiving local authority is aware and that support services are adequate for those individuals or families as they need it. We have been championing that kind of practice as advisors for a long time, and have been communicating that message at regional events with individual local authorities. We haven't quite got the data at the moment to back some of that up, but we are working with analysts to try and bring that forward, and we've been pushing for that and as an advisor team to support our work, working with individual local authorities and regionally to try and improve practice in that area. So to reassure you, there is some work going on in that area.
If you need any support from us
Great.
with regards to, yes, this is a really good thing to name and
Yeah.
shame, just drop us a note and we'll
Yeah.
be absolutely on board with that. Whip up the others as well.
Okay, thank
just
you.
got a couple more questions. I know Matt's got his hand up as well. One is just, it's fantastic news about the settlement, so 3 to 5 years, how that works through. Is there any opportunity with regards to the calculation and considering deprivation?
Are you talking Homelessness Prevention Fund or
Sort
wide?
of like homelessness prevention and also sort of the wider grant settlements, but
Yeah.
just in this lens.
Yeah, so in terms of the Homelessness Prevention Fund, there will be an opportunity as part of a consultation around a new formula, and we have been working with local authorities quite closely to be looking at the future of the Homelessness Prevention Fund and that formula. The previous settlement around that was for 2 years, and we're working through now what that looks like for 25-26 with the new budget announcement. But there will be opportunities to influence, and again, we will take that on board, and if you're wanting to be part of, we can make suggestions to policy colleagues.
That sounds fabulous, and yes, and yes to the last part of that. Final question for me, otherwise I'll get shot by Claire because I can feel her staring over my shoulder now. Obviously, we can't build our way out of these kind of problems. Prevention has to be key in where we are and what we're doing, engaging early. Are you working with the private rented sector with regards to how we can engage with them better, differently, levels of rent, what they need from us? Because they are a massive part of the solution, as Tom said earlier as well, but the right standards in the right way.
It's a really good question, actually. So, how can we influence the private rented sector is quite a difficult space. In terms of your comment about working in the prevention space, I think what I want to say is, in the absence of us being able to control the private rented sector as much as we'd like, I'm working with some local authorities. Obviously, I work with Luton, and private landlords are telling those really active local authorities in the private rented space that what they value. And so, yes, they do value money, but what they absolutely value is a single point of contact and your officer at the end of the phone to deal with an issue, to answer a question, so that they don't have to get involved. And actually, I work with one particular area who is in a Section 114 position, so that's effectively bankrupt, and they are doing some amazing work in a really high rental area. But those two officers, if they ever left, it would be a real risk to the business, because the landlords are leaning into that. I think there's a lot to understand around how renters' rights is going to impact landlords. There's a little bit of worry that they might decide to leave the sector. I think the NRLA do some great work with those larger portfolio landlords, but I think there's a risk in whether you've got smaller portfolio landlords and how you might be able to reach out to them so they understand what renters' rights means for them. There seems to be a bit of a perception around those smaller pension pot landlords, and they don't know what it means, and they think they'll never get someone out. If I wanted to sell the house, I can't get them out. So I think there's things that we can do in the meantime in terms of engaging the private rented sector to work with local authorities. We are looking at bigger, more strategic pieces of work, and whether there's any levers in there that we can look at, but I don't have anything more concrete on that. But certainly there is a really much needed space for them in the market, and so yeah, we're working on that too. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And the names of those officers would be great as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can pass that on.
No, you're not. Well,
Sorry?
we can't promote poaching. And part of our role is around identifying good practice and sharing that, and we do that as part of newsletter information, but also individually with local authorities. And we probably will have some kind of suggestions that might be relevant to Luton that we can pass on, some practice that is working well elsewhere, could be adapted, and work well for Luton.
And equally, I'd just like to say that I've used some things that Luton officers have told me that they do in the prevention space, and I'm citing those to other local authorities. So everyone has best practice, and so part of what I try and do and we try and do as a team is tease that out, because we're all in this together, really. So how can we learn from each other?
Yeah, thanks very much for that presentation, Ellie and Sonia. That was really informative, especially the information about what the future plans are for MHCLG. In 2003, the government announced a ring-fence fund of about 1.8 billion called Supporting People, which you all know about. And in 2009, the ring-fence was removed. Do you think the current government has any intention, or do you hear any whispers of potentially relaunching something that was similar to the Supporting You People Fund?
Obviously, we alluded earlier to the Supported Housing Regulatory Oversight Act. We know supported housing is much needed. I mentioned the SHAP funding for the complex needs coming through for Luton, and so we don't have anything to kind of say about whether the government is thinking about any indication at all that they might be looking at reinvigorating supporting people. But we do know that that's a space, particularly post-COVID, that there are more complex people that are in need of supported housing. So again, they form part of the conversations that sit around both the Act coming forward and what we need to do to make it effective, but both in terms of supply. So when we talk about supply, it's supply of social housing, it's supply of private rented, it's supply of supported housing, and what's needed in the sector to bring that forward. So all of those conversations being had, but I don't necessarily have any indications that I can share with you.
Good morning, thank you. I think the question I'm coming from is more of a potential thing, really, in relation to local authority pension funds. I sit on a pension fund, and I always take the view they should be investing in their communities, as well as investing into the corporate companies that they do invest in. And I just wondered, is there a potential for the government to look at that? Are they looking at how local authority funds can invest in maybe into supporting local authorities of housing?
Yeah, it's really not an area that we have involvement with, but we can take your question away and try and get an answer for you. Okay.
Any other questions? No? Okay.
Exactly, roll a cigarette.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.